What's up guys, it's Morgan and welcome back to my channel. Okay, so today's video is going to be a bit personal, but it's completely fine because it is okay to talk about this stuff. So in today's video, I'm telling you guys about my journey with being diagnosed with bipolar, and specifically the diagnosis process. Diagnosis process? That makes sense, right? The diagnosis process. Okay, so what they sort of look for, what happens, how like it happened to me, that kind of thing. So let's get on with the video. Okay, so I guess we have to begin like with the history kind of thing. So I started experiencing like mental health issues, you could say, when I was around 11 or 12. Obviously, like looking back, I know that they were problems now, but when I was like 12, I didn't really know what was happening. I was experiencing quite a lot of depression and I was experiencing psychosis. If you guys don't know what that is, psychosis is like when you have hallucinations. I was experiencing auditory hallucinations. People were talking to me that weren't there, but I didn't really seek help for it until I was around 14, I think, because in my head when I was younger, there were people out there that had been physically abused. There were people out there that had like, you know, horror stories of how they'd grown up. Like I had a good childhood, guys. Like I was in a good school. There was no reason for me to feel this way. So I felt like I didn't have an excuse to feel like that way. So I didn't feel like I should get help for it, if that makes sense. Which is a really, really messed up mentality actually. But I feel like a lot of people feel like it too. Like, if you don't have a reason, then why should you feel like that? But the reason is chemicals are not going right in your brain, people, and that's the only reason you need. So anyway, I finally sort of started seeking help and started talking to like the counselors and stuff when I was around 14. And then I didn't really say anything about like the psychosis or like how, like the extent of how I was feeling till I was about 16. So yeah, when I was 16, it got really, really bad. Like I was really not doing okay, and you know, my hallucinations were really, really intense. Like I had like 6 different voices in my head. They were saying really, really negative things, and I finally brought it up, and it was so awkward, but I did it. And I was basically like, this is what's going on, my dudes. Like, it's not cool. And basically I said that they were saying mean things to me, and they were basically telling me to do things like suicidal things and things that would hurt me or hurt others. And obviously as soon as you say something about hurting people or hurting yourself in a session with a counselor, psychiatrist, whatever, they have to break confidentiality and they have to tell people. So that's what happened, and I was taken to A&E basically. I think everyone around me thought I was gonna like try and kill myself, but like I wasn't. Like there were voices telling me to do things and I was just having to put up with it and having to listen to them, but I wasn't suicidal at that time. But yeah, I was taken to A&E, and that was the first time that I was introduced to CAMS. It's basically child and adolescent mental health services. I don't know if they have it like in America and stuff, but that's what it is in England. And the psychiatrist came in and sort of evaluated me, see how I was, gave me like future appointments for a psychiatrist review and all this stuff. And then yeah, I was in hospital. I had to stay overnight kind of thing, and then the next morning my mum walked up with a box of fruit and she was like, we're leaving. And I was like, okay, guess I'm going. And the doctor was sort of like, no, you can't really take her, like we're still like trying to observe her and stuff. And my mum was like, I'm taking her. And as soon as I got outside, like generally I felt a lot better, and she sat me in the car and she was like, right, tell me what the fuck's going on, because at that point I hadn't really talked about it a lot with my mum at all. Like me and my mum weren't that close on that level with like mental stuff, because I just felt like she is such a strong woman and she's so like she's really good at dealing with anything. Like she's like I don't know how to describe her. She's just so good at dealing with stuff, and I just felt like I was so pathetic almost, because I was like sad and I had no reason to be sad kind of thing. Yeah, I had no reason, and I just didn't feel like I could talk to her, and I felt so awkward about it. And there was nothing that she did, that was just me building barriers in my own head. And so basically she sat me down in the car and I basically told her everything. I was like, I basically have these things in my head, like I feel depressed all the time, I feel this, I feel that. And actually that was such a massive step in me and my mum's relationship. It was amazing. Like from then on we've been so close, and like we talk about everything, and I think it was like the step that needed to happen kind of thing in me and my mom's relationship. And now I tell her everything. Like she's literally my best friend. And then from then on I was in the system. So I was in the CAM system, which meant I had like psychiatric reviews and all this stuff. So then at my next review kind of thing, I went to an actual psychiatrist and they gave me like a ton of medication to take kind of things. And what became apparent was I was actually experiencing a lot of mood swings. So I was experiencing intense mania and I was experiencing intense depressive episodes. I mean, I remember like being admitted into like the school, because obviously I went to a boarding school, so we had a thing called the sanatorium, which is like the in-school hospital where you sort of stayed if you were ill but you couldn't go home. I remember staying there and I was really depressed, and then the next one I woke up and I was like, wow, I can cure cancer. Like I am invincible. Like if a car hit me, it would bend around me. Like I was so high on that spectrum kind of thing. Like I was really, really manic. And I remember walking outside, I left the building, and one of the matrons, which is like one of the carers, came after me, and he was like, Morgan, do you want to come back inside? Like, you're not in any clothes. And basically I was just in my towel, and I was like, why am I in my towel? Like what? I was so confused, and I was just like, well, I have things to do, like I don't have time to get dressed. And I was like, started to walk off into like the school, and then like the matron was like, Morgan, come back, like come on, let's get you dressed kind of thing. And it was just like that crazy. Like it was like someone had injected like caffeine into my veins kind of thing. Like I was just so high. And then when I was depressed, I was seriously depressed. And yeah, so that's one of the things we identified in psychiatrist like sessions. So I had one about every 3 weeks, I would say. So yeah, every couple of weeks I would go and then be like, what's going on? And they'd be treating me, you know, they give me different medications, fixing my medications. But a thing that I've noticed is at the beginning of like a diagnosis journey, they don't treat you for a diagnosis, they treat you for the symptoms you're experiencing. So it became a bit frustrating, and you might find it frustrating too, because they just sort of, they want to make you better for who you are now, but they don't really, like, they're not like, oh, okay, you've got tonsillitis, so we're going to give you antibiotics. They just give you antibiotics for, you know, just to treat you, but they don't know what they're treating. And that became quite frustrating for me, but I got on with it because they were trying to make me feel bad kind of thing. After a while, we started discussing what diagnosis would be, but the fact is that I had to actually push for this. And the reason I was pushing for it, guys, is because I felt like I had no valid reason to feel bad unless I had a diagnosis, which is completely messed up, I know. But I just felt like, you know when you call in sick and you're like, hi, I can't come in school and say I'm sick? They're like, oh, okay, she's sick. But if you called up and you're like, oh, I have chickenpox, or I have tonsillitis, I have an actual diagnosed problem, like it just seems better, I guess. Like it seems like you have a valid reason, like an excuse. And I wasn't looking for an excuse, but I was looking for like, I don't know, sort of like a thing to say, I'm really feeling this, I'm not just being dramatic. Like I had a really messed up mindset back then, guys, and it's so awkward, like mental health, because like obviously mental illness has been romanticized over the past like couple of years. Like you get like Wattpad fan fictions, and they're like, I was depressed and he saved me and all this stuff, and like mental illness has become more and more common, and because of that it's become more and more of an excuse people have used. And I didn't want people to think I was using it as an excuse. I didn't want people thinking I was that girl. So anyway, yes, that was basically what's happening. And they started discussing the fact that I could have personality disorder, and they were discussing borderline personality disorder. And when I first heard of this, I was like, hell no. It was because it suggests that you've had some sort of trauma in your life, and it suggests that, you know, your personality is almost like affected from your previous traumas in your life. And I was like, I've had no traumas in my life. Like I've had a good upbringing. I sort of was insulted by this idea of this diagnosis, which again is ridiculous. But I was like 16 and I was nervous and I was scared, and I didn't want to be labeled as a crazy person, but I didn't not want to be labeled because then people would think that I'm just pretending to be crazy. Like this was what everything was going in my head. So yeah, they sort of stuck with the idea that I was having sort of mood disorder. And then it got to when I was about 17 or 18, and I was in I think it was year 12. But I had a suicide attempt, and I'm not going to talk about this in this video. If you guys want me to go into more detail in another video, I will. But that basically happened, and from that, it was almost like everything got pushed forward. Like, it sounds so bad saying it out loud, but my suicide attempt meant that they started taking me seriously. But again, the problem I had, guys, growing up, I had this thing where if you didn't ask the correct question, I wouldn't give you the answer. And it was like, if you didn't specifically say, how have you been feeling from A and B, I wouldn't give you the answer because I just didn't think you wanted to know. So my psychiatrist would be like, how have you been? And I'd be like, do you mean currently? And he's like, yeah. And I'd be like, I'm fine. And that would be like the end of the conversation. And obviously when he's asking me that, he's looking for, oh, I've been feeling like this and this, and then I felt like this. I didn't say that because I just didn't think he wanted to know that, you know what I mean? And that was my mentality. And thank God I had my counselor with me. And she was really, like, she really had my back 100%. And, you know, she really pushed me to, like, get help. She was always on at them. She was always on my medication. Like, she helped me with everything, especially in school. You know, so she was there and she was like, Morgan, what he means is this kind of thing. But I didn't have those sort of reactions to those questions. So I don't think they really took me seriously until something big happened, like suicide, which is ridiculous. But yeah, so basically I had that. And then they started going like, right, we're gonna diagnose you now from that. Also, they were really pushing to get me a diagnosis because I was about to turn 18. And when you turn 18, you go into adult psychiatry and you leave like the child and adolescence one. And if you leave the system without having a diagnosis, it's really hard to get back into the system. And that's what they were really worried about for me. They were really worried that I'd go off to university and I wouldn't be able to get back in the system. So they really pushed to get a diagnosis. And by this point, they were thinking it was more bipolar rather than a personality disorder, because what they actually found out was that my mood swings weren't up and down. They were like in between a mood, if that makes sense. It initially looked like this was happening, up and down, up and down. But what was actually happening was I was having like a manic episode and a depressive episode. So this is my manic episode. And then in the manic episode, I was having like high mania and low mania. And in the depressive episode, I was having like functional depression and low functioning depression. So when they looked at it like that, they realized it wasn't like 2 different mood swings in one day. It was one continuous episode for like months. And from that, they were like, it's more bipolar rather than borderline. Yeah, so then they were like sort of sticking with this idea of bipolar, and also the medication that I was on was really helping with my like psychosis and stuff. So I haven't heard auditory hallucinations since I was like 17 now. So that's really good. That was, you know, progress had been made. Yeah, so when I turned 18, they basically like, happy birthday, here's your diagnosis. Because bipolar as well, like it's an adult diagnosis, so you can't be diagnosed with it if you're under 18. Like they just don't let you get diagnosed with it, even if you are bipolar. Like it's really confusing. I think it's something to do with medication. Like you can't give bipolar medication to like underage kids because it's bad for you or something. But yeah, so I basically turned 18 and they were like, happy birthday, here's your diagnosis. And I was like, woo! Yeah, that's basically what happened, guys. That's how I got diagnosed. Yeah, I would say like one of the key things they told me to do throughout my diagnosis process is they told me to keep a journal, and they told me to monitor everything, because when you obviously go into a psychiatrist like appointment, they only see you for like 30 minutes literally, like, and in those 30 minutes they're meant to gauge like how you've been feeling for months. So if you're just there like, yeah, I've been feeling all right, like they're not going to think, oh, there's something wrong. But if you go in there and you literally show them like, between A and B I felt depressed, and between B and C I felt manic, like they're gonna see like a pattern which helps with their diagnosis. Like things that I notice as well, that I know that when I'm going into like a manic episode, my appetite goes down, I stop eating, and I got that from the journal. Okay, so that really helps me, because I know, by the way guys, in like future me is gonna go into an episode because I'm having these symptoms now. Like that's how I can recognize it. So I really advise you guys doing that as well. Like one thing that I wasn't during my whole process of diagnosis, like I wasn't aggressively upfront, and I wanted help, but I didn't want it to look like I wanted help. So I didn't go into the office and I wasn't like, okay, I'm feeling like this. I was just like, whatever dude, like fix me, but I didn't want to tell you how I'm feeling. And that was really like detrimental. Like that was not a good idea. Like it just didn't help anything. So if you really do want help for something, push for it. Like do not wait until you're at a point where like suicide is an option. Like that is not an option, okay? So guys, to conclude this sort of video, do I agree with my diagnosis? I have days where I'm like, yes, I completely 100% agree with my diagnosis. And then I have other days where I'm like, no, they were completely wrong. They just shoved this label on me and they're wrong. The problem is no mental illness is the same in every person. Like even if it's a generalized like, okay, that's bipolar is different in every person. And as well, there's different types of bipolar. And I think it's just a hard situation to be in. I remember last year, I completely came off my medication because I was like, I don't have an illness, like screw you, like these medications aren't doing anything for me. And as I started coming off my medication, I became more and more paranoid. My symptoms came back in full throttle. So I was experiencing very like mania, a lot of depression. And I got so paranoid that I convinced myself that my medication was poisoning me. So I literally came off it completely, and I couldn't get back on it because in my head it was poison. And it was a horrendous place for me. Like it was disgusting. Like I was so unstable, I was so unhappy last year. And like I was like at that point where, you know, you're about to break down, but like you don't have time to have a breakdown. I don't know if you guys have like experienced that, but that's how I felt the whole year. And it got to summer and I was really wanting to tell my mum about this, how I was feeling, how I wasn't on my medication. But then straight away in summer, I was going traveling with my boyfriend, and then I stayed at his family's house in Hong Kong for most of the summer, and it was embarrassing, it was hard, it was difficult. I wasn't on my medication, I was not stable, and I was trying to like be in a different country away from my parents and like socialize, and it was horrendous. I was embarrassed, like I felt like I didn't show my best self when I was out there. Like I couldn't tell them I'm feeling really unstable right now because I'm not on my medication and I'm also bipolar. Like, it was a horrific place to be in. So guys, if your doctor told you to get on medication, don't go off it. Like, I've learned from my mistakes, don't go off it. And then like in summer, I literally sat down and I was like, Mum, this is what happening. And she literally was like, literally just took my mum to say like, Morgan, you know you can adapt it for you. And I was like, wait, what? Like, I can do that? And from then on, like, I have been content on my medication, you know? But it's just, yeah, it's a very confusing world. I will probably disagree with my diagnosis in a couple of weeks, and I'll probably agree with it in a couple of weeks. Like, it is a constant battle. I think like no label can really define who you are as a person completely. And I think because of that, it leaves room for doubt. But for now, like, I'm content with my diagnosis. It is what it is, you know, it doesn't define me. It doesn't make me who I am. It's just something that's like happened, I guess. And yeah, that's my diagnosis story, guys. I hope if you're going through a diagnosis process, this helped. I hope if you're just curious about the subject, this helped. Yeah, if you've got any questions, guys, comment down below, leave me questions. If you want me to go in more detail about anything else I've talked about today, leave a comment, DM me, whatever you guys want to do. But I'll see you guys next time. Peace.